Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sports Psych Show. Thanks so much for joining me. Today I'm delighted to be joined by psychologist Johan Forsberg. Johan, welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you on. We're going to be talking about a topic that's so dear to my heart and relates to a paper you've recently done with colleagues about psychological states and performance. And you've had some interesting findings in that research paper. But before we get on to that, I'd love to know about you, Johan. So tell us about yourself and tell us about your work.
Okay, I've been doing this maybe 100 times and I'm always telling a different story. So we see where we end up. Maybe I start to rewinding a bit, or maybe 30, 40 years.
Perfect.
I grew up in Sweden, up north, in a small town called Piteå. And that's a really big hockey town. We have fostered quite many NHL, in my opinion, all-stars like Thomas Holmström, Mikael Renberg, Mattias Öhlund, and so on. But when I grew up, I was more of a stay-at-home kid, actually. So when I was like 8 or 9, finally my dad took me to the ice hockey rink because they were kind of bored just having me running around at home or reading books or drawing pictures. So that was my beginning of my ice hockey career. But I didn't really want to do that because I knew I was going to become a doctor, actually. Because almost all my cousins on my father's side are doctors, and all my father's brothers and sisters. So I knew I was going down that path.
Wow.
So that was I knew I was going to be a doctor, but I didn't. But that's another story. So I played hockey and went to school, and I wasn't what you nowadays called talent. I couldn't skate, couldn't shoot, couldn't do anything. I was quite poor, really bad hockey player. But somehow I managed to keep playing because I thought it was fun. I had a lot of friends. And then someday I was in the elite team here in my hometown, playing in the second division. I don't know how it happened, but it happened.
I have to interject. How can you not
Yeah,
have talent and play in the elite team? This doesn't make sense, Johan.
no, it doesn't, because I don't really like the term talent, because I wasn't, as I said, a good skater. I couldn't shoot. I wasn't skilled, but I knew what I needed to do to become a hockey player. So I put in a lot of time and a lot of effort, and I said to myself, in a quite early age, I want to be the best trained athlete. I want to be strong. I want to have good endurance, good speed. So I did. So you can say I had talent, but not in the typical way, probably. So after that, I just continued playing ice hockey. I got to play down in Malmö, which is in the southern parts of Sweden, and then I went back north because I like it here. And after that, I played elite hockey in the top divisions for almost, was it 15, 20 years, with the highlights being the Swedish Championship. We won that with Skellefteå in 2013, and then I won the European Championship with Luleå Hockey. So it was quite a journey.
You were seriously an elite competitor.
Yeah, I was, somehow I became one. And then my last season was the COVID season. So it got interrupted in the playoffs. And then I already started at Umeå University studying to become a psychologist with a focus at elite sport, actually. So that the COVID break didn't cause me that much harm, actually, because I was already studying. And at the same point, I started doing some clinical work as well. At that time, working with other athletes as a kind of a mental coach before I had my degree. So ever since, I've been working with elite athletes and coaches and teams, and I got my psychological degree, my master degree, last summer. And now I do my own stuff with elite sports. I work with the Swedish Ice Hockey Federation. We do education work and research. And I also work 100% at the psychiatric unit north of Stockholm. So that's pretty much where I'm at right now.
That's really interesting. I mean, I'd like to unpack a little bit
Hmm.
more your experiences, your early life experiences. But before we dive into the paper, the early life experiences you had and talent and going into the elite realm of sport, but just dwelling on something you said at the end there, doing work in a psychiatric institute. What's your role there? What are you doing there?
That's a good question. I do quite of different things. I
Hmm.
2 days a week I do psychological testing and assessments, and the other days I do psychotherapy, including both CBT and PDT. So I have a degree in both. So I'm kind of a mixture when it comes to psychotherapy theories. Actually, I work with both psychodynamic or modern psychodynamic work and CBT.
That must give you a lovely broad range of experiences across those different populations away from sport. Have you found so far that that's positively impacts your capacity to work with sports people, or is it? Have you found it quite a separate entity?
That's a great question because when I came into the psychiatric unit, I thought this is going to be a different ballpark, but it isn't. In my opinion, it's still people. Hockey players are people, sportsmen and women are people, and the people I meet every day are quite the same. Of course, they have different struggles and different problems, but when we look at it, and when I sit across them at the table, it's the same kind of struggles and the same kind of pain, actually.
Absolutely fascinating, and I mean, moving over to ice hockey, I mean, Johan, what a sport that is. I mean, I've worked with, I am absolutely not an expert on ice hockey. However, I have worked with a few ice hockey players and some teams over the years, although I haven't had the opportunity to work deeply within a team in ice hockey. But what an incredible sport, and the speed of it means that that heavy investment in the cognitive side, the awareness, the
Yeah.
anticipation, the decision making, just uber fascinating to me. The personality characteristics there almost feels at times like it's a game of violence at times.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is. It is. It's a crazy sport.
yeah.
It's, as you said, it's so fast. It's so fast, and it's so like impactful. It's hard hits. It's speed, and you're doing it standing on small thin blades. It's kind of crazy, actually.
It's insane because as I'm saying, I'm thinking there's almost like the two ends of the continuum of that violence versus intellect. You know, your
That's
capacity
right.
to recognize patterns, draw on that, and make incredibly anticipate and make incredibly quick decisions. Yet
Mm.
at the same time, find yourself in a fight 2 minutes later. I
Yeah.
have to ask this very basic question, Johan. But did
No, it's not my real teeth. I had them replaced.
they look lovely for everybody listening in.
Oh,
Johan
thank
has
you, thank
wonderful
you.
teeth, but are you saying they are literally not your real teeth?
That's right.
Wow. They
Of course not. I played hockey for 20 years. Of course, they're not my
is
own.
that very much a phenomenon within ice hockey? Is by and large players don't
Yeah,
have their real teeth.
that's right.
And may I therefore ask, as a sort of a different way of asking the question I wanted to ask you, is did you get into any fights, and is that where you lost your teeth, or did you just throw your head onto the ice at some stage?
It's a kind of different story here in Europe and Sweden. There isn't a lot of fighting here,
Gotcha. Is that very much
but
a North American Canadian thing?
yeah,
Okay,
it is. It is. It's a cultural thing.
gotcha.
But I got in a few fights here in Sweden as well, but it's not as common as in the States and Canada. But I lost my teeth. I got a shot. I got a puck right in my face. So, and actually in my last season, so my fiance wasn't that pleased.
Just moving backwards. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, we've had some really fascinating conversations on the Sports Site show with really interesting people in the area of talent, researching this notion of talent, and as you've alluded to, you know, the vast majority of our colleagues around the world would push back at the notion of talent. I'd love to get your, because you did use the word, and you said, well, look, I didn't have a great deal of ability straight away or competence straight away, where maybe some of my contemporaries might have that. I found that as a professional golfer as well, very slow to improve, and probably be very slow to be any good at it as a professional as well. I must be honest. So what's your take on this notion of talent? And yeah, I'd just love to get some of your thoughts on it.
It's probably going to take a lot of time if I go dive in deeply. But at the Swedish Ice Hockey Federation, me and, or I should say, colleagues there have done some great work at the topic when talk about the relative age effect and maturation and stuff like that. So I think it comes down to that it's really, really hard, not to say impossible, to say this kid is going to be great when he or she is like 5, 6, 7, or let's say 14, 15. I think it's impossible, and I've been in the sports since forever. I can't tell. I can tell this is a good kid now, but we never know if he or she is going to be a successful elite athlete 10 years from now. So I think that's the biggest problem. And still, we have parents, coaches, and organizations who think they can do it. I think that's the major problem. And we have NHL teams who got scouts working every day, watching teams and different players. They still have a big struggle finding the right players when it comes down to the draft. So I think it's worth talking about that is really, really hard. Talent isn't something real, in my opinion. It's all about maturation and who is getting bigger first and who got the power to skate and stuff like that. So I think we need to talk about more about the complexity of getting good in a sport, no matter if it's golf or ice hockey. I think that's the main question.
So almost what I'm hearing you say there is there's no denial that somebody who's young might have an individual isolated competence, but that is individual and it's isolated, and so one shouldn't necessarily assume therefore that because that person demonstrates a competence in a given domain, a given sport, that we use this overarching term of talent and we get very excited about it. But actually, what we need to do is take more of an attitude of, hey, look, that's great, confident, brilliant, but this doesn't necessarily mean or correlate with any success in the future.
That's right. And of course, we can look at an ice hockey game of 10-year-olds play and say, this is a good kid now, and this kid is struggling more, like I did. But we still can't say this is going to be an NHL player or a Swedish ice hockey elite player, and this kid is not going to be. I think you have to separate those two things, because you can see this is a good kid, but you can't say he's going to be a star.
So, what was the difference or the differences that made the difference for you? Because by your own admission, perhaps you didn't demonstrate any of those competencies in any abundance. And for everybody listening in, Johan is shaking his head vigorously. But then you went on to have what sounds like a pretty stellar professional career at the highest level. So, in simple, brief terms, what were the things that you felt that you engaged in and with that enabled you to go from one state of affairs to this sudden, becoming a highly competent player?
It wasn't probably, how should I say it? I knew that I wasn't the greatest player, and I asked myself the question, what do I need to do to become better? That was the first thing I asked myself. Because what do I need to do? That's a big part of it. And then I asked myself, what am I able to do? Can I be the best skater? Can I be the most skilled player? The answer was no, I couldn't. So then I figured out I need to run more. I need to lift more weights. I need to try to be a leader in the team, try to take responsibility, try to be a good teammate. And I try to foster those skills more. And I've actually been doing that ever since. asking myself the question, what can I do better? What am I able to do better? And then I try to do it. And then you have to look back. Was it a good strategy, or do I have to try something else? And that's pretty much the way I work with my athletes nowadays as well.
I think that's really fascinating. I think that to me sounds like a very sophisticated approach, especially asking yourself that question: what am I able to do better?
That's right.
Because I know certainly as a young golfer, and I suppose I was a young golfer slightly before Tiger Woods came onto the scene. I was just a couple of years younger than Tiger Woods, but it felt like at that time, if I'm dwelling on golf for a little bit here, and dwelling on my own experience growing up, it was, looking at the games of the best players and going, well, I've got to get there, and I've got to do this, this, and this to get there. And I didn't stop to think. And I think a lot of young players across sports don't either stop to think or don't have coaches who help them stop to think about what are they able to get better at. And it's giving yourself permission potentially to look at what I can put to the side. I can recognize that the very best, if I want to get to the professional level, the elite adult level, if you like, the very best might demonstrate certain competencies that I'm just not capable of getting there in those competencies. And it's okay to put them to the side. It's okay to be a student of other things and improve those things. So it feels like you took a very, what I would describe, a meta approach, sort of rising above yourself and going, okay, what am I capable of developing from a competence perspective? And then harnessing that and putting your energy into those things.
That's right. And it is, and it was really important to highlight for myself, how can I be the best aspect or the best player I can be? And that's a different ballpark. I can't be like Sidney Crosby, who is one of the best players right now, because he's a different person, he's a different athlete, and I had to find different ways doing it.
Yeah, and again, just very, very briefly here, you just, because you're sparking things in my mind. It's, I work with young golfers, for example, and, I say young, sort of late teens who are very, very good. And the reality is they're never going to hit the golf ball like a Tiger Woods, like a Rory McIlroy, like a Brooks Koepka, but they don't necessarily need to be able to go and compete at the very highest level, I think. And I just do think it, by and large, a broad brush statement, but it's the same across all sports, that if you have ambitions in the game and you are taking it seriously, and you want to get to the adult elite level, the professional level, then that sophisticated lens of what you're doing can be really impactful. One last thing here before we get onto the paper, 20 minutes in, one last thing here, because I'm so fascinated in this area, and it's really interesting, Scandinavian sport. So I'm bringing several countries together here. That adage of as many as possible, as long as possible, as good as possible, seems to be as much as anywhere on planet Earth. You guys, as in Scandi countries, have really seem to really embrace that. Again, broad brush statement, but would you say that's a fair thing by and large to say?
Yeah, it is. Maybe we pat ourselves at the back now, but it's a big topic here in Sweden, both in the Ice Hockey Federation and different federations when it comes to kids and youth sports, because as we talked about earlier, talent isn't a great word to use when guiding how to educate coaches and stuff like that. So it's much better both for long-term performance, but also for overall health, to get people involved in different kind of sports. So it's kind of a spotlight we try to put on everything we do here in Sweden and in Scandinavia as well. But I should say, I know they do good stuff in USA, including USA Hockey as well. So, but we really like the idea that you just talked about.
Yeah. Should we get on to the stuff we're here to talk about?
Let's
Mainly?
do it.
Although I feel I could stop the podcast now, and it would be a very insightful listen for most people listening in. But look, I want to talk about this paper, mental states, as something that really fascinates me, and certainly some of the findings that you had in this paper are well, probably a little bit challenging for somebody like myself, which I absolutely love. So let's get on to that. Now, you've co-written a paper, and I'll provide the title of the paper here, and give credit to your colleagues. So it's entitled "A Daily Longitudinal Analysis of Reciprocal Relationships Between Psychological States and Performance in NHL Players." And you've written this alongside, and please excuse my anglicised version of these names, Anna Lallo, Andreas Iversen, Andreas Stenling, Kristen Diefenbach, John Lind, and Eric Lundqvist. Did I do okay there?
Yeah, you did. Really good.
Very anglicised, I'm sure, but I'd love to unpack this paper with you. Let's begin at the beginning. What's the starting point of this paper? What's the interest here for you personally? Yeah, just give us a bit of background first before we dive in.
The background is actually this came to be being me and my, at that time, classmate, Anna Lallo. We were thinking about doing a master thesis together at our final year at the program. And we started with an empty whiteboard. We had nothing, but we knew we both were interested in the intersection between how you feel or how you think and how you perform. And when we start to look at the research done before, it was quite inconclusive actually. We all know that past studies have shown that anxiety is not good for performance and that confidence is good. So we actually kind of intentionally took a naiveness theoretically when we stood there in front of the whiteboard. So we started writing down everything, and we ended up with maybe 70 or 80 different states. It was cognitions, it was grit, and it was from the eyes off, and it was everything. Yeah. And after that, the real work began actually. So we had to try to narrow it down, but still wanted to include both positive and negative aspects or states. Because when we looked at for research done before, it was kind of a bias towards the negative states. Of course, performance anxiety being the number one. Yes. So that was kind of the beginning. And then we aimed high. We said to ourselves, we want the best of the best to be included in this study. We want to use or try to reach out to the NHL players. And when we talked with other colleagues, classmates, and people around, they said, this is not going to happen. I can promise you that no one is going to be a part of this study.
Well, that's some motivation for you there, right there.
Actually, it was.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Both me and Anna comes from the elite sports, so we got kind of triggered by it.
Okay.
So that was the beginning of it, and then we formed a great team with the names you just mentioned, and we start working to try to get a hold of some participants for study. And actually, it went on really, really easy. A lot of NHL players wanted to be a part of our study. So it was the first, I shouldn't say surprise for us, but for other people. So that was the start, actually.
Can you, you've spoken briefly there to mental states, but for all those listening in, can you be as specific as possible for me here? What do you mean by mental states? What is a mental state? You've given us some examples, but if you can broaden this out for me, that would be awesome.
Of course. We talked a lot about this with the team, or I should say within the team, and we ended up with a definition from Beale with colleagues, and that is that psychological states are mental conditions involving both emotions, thoughts, and cognitions. So it's kind of a broad definition of something happening within you, inside a person, or in this matter, ice hockey player. So that's pretty much it. So it's both cognition and emotions.
Okay. And would you say can mental states be seen or not so much?
This is depending on if I take the CBT or PDT approach. I don't know, but it's. I should say it's also something that is active during a specific time. It's not like a mood. You can be like down for or depressed for quite a bit, but in our definition, a state is more varying during the day.
Gotcha.
If that
So
makes sense.
temporally, time-wise,
That's right.
these are very narrow passages of time.
It could be, but not necessarily. It's not like instinct or it's happening now and now
Yeah.
it's gone, because we know, for example, with performance anxiety, it's not a matter of 10 seconds. It's probably hours or minutes.
Yeah. Okay. So it can last. A state can last a whole game,
Yeah.
but it can fluctuate through a game.
That's right.
Brilliant. So, dive a little bit into this research project. So what specifically were you trying to discover, and broaden that out for us a little bit?
That's right. We tried, maybe I should start with the research design, because we really wanted to make it like a daily diary study. So, because we know that research before mostly had used cross-sectional studies, or has been cross-sectional studies, including post or at best pre and post
Yep.
measurements. So we wanted to do it like we did actually. We sent the players or the participants notification using an app every day for 40 days, I think, 30 to 40 days. So this was one of our biggest goals going into this. We wanted to have a intensive design. So that was the start. So every day the players got a notification around 12 o'clock, and where they were asked to answer 7 single item questions regarding these states, like I feel down 1 to 10, I feel anxious 1 to 10, I feel confident 1 to 10. And so another thing people around us told us before when we talked about this study design, this is this is not going to end up well, because they're never going to answer it.
They're worried about the adherence.
And this
The
was this.
adherence would be a problem.
Yeah, the adherence will be low. Probably they are going to answer it the first week, and then they're going to be get tired of us, and no, like delete the app. But they didn't. We had a staggering, I think it was 82% response
Wow,
rate
that's really
for
good.
22 players for over a month. So it was a big success actually. So that was the big part of the study, and then we used a metric called game score to try to find associations between the psychological states and how they played the game later that night. So they got the notification at 12 o'clock, and then they played the game. And then we looked at these associations between state and performance. But we also wanted to include how they played the game and how the states were the day after.
I'd love to check my understanding here. So every participant, 22 players, members of NHL teams, had an app where they inputted around about 10 scores related to mental states.
Yeah.
And they did that every day. And sorry, did you say they did that around about the same time, sort of midday? Was that correct?
Exactly midday for all the players.
Exactly midday for all the players. And so that was 7 days a week. For how long?
For 5 weeks.
For 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's every day. So whether they were playing or not, they would do that. Okay, right. I've got that, and then you also had the capacity to measure performance by using something called game score. What does just briefly, what does game score measure? What kind of data points does game score actually provide?
When it comes to performance metrics in ice hockey, actually as we call it in Europe, soccer is quite a bit ahead of us
Okay.
because we have for a long time been using traditional statistics, and that would be like ice time or goals and stuff like that. But now we see progress going towards more advanced metrics, and where GameScore try to make a composite metric of different aspects of the game. And I should say it's individual performance. It's not team performance. It's this player shows this game score. So it's a composite metric including many different aspects of the game actually. So it's quite advanced actually.
What? Just to give us a brief idea of what kind of metrics you've been a player yourself. So if you had your
Yeah.
data tracked by game score, what kind of things might I see?
It is shots, it is ice time, but it's also expected metrics, and that's a kind of a it's kind of an advanced
Yeah.
thing to explain. But it's more or less what's the expectancy to score from this
Yeah.
position regarding surroundings and stuff like that. So
Big thing in football, soccer at the moment.
yeah, huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. And so what you were trying to examine is obviously the relationship between mental state and performance and that performance data, and also examining mental states after performance. And what was your reasoning behind really trying to hone in on after post performance?
We thought a lot about this writing the paper. Why did we do it? And it's because I if I talk just my own opinions, I think it's something that's have been forgotten when it comes to elite sports. We often talk about how is the performance being affected by this state or that state, but we almost every time forget what's happening afterwards. And this includes, in my opinion, both research being done, but also when it comes to coaches and organizations. How can we help players after a game if they haven't played as good as they like to, or stuff like that? So that was my and our biggest goal, including that part of the study.
Critical, and I'm sure we'll come on to speak about that in a few minutes. But talk us through your findings. What does that results section tell us?
And this was actually the first time I was surprised during this whole process because we couldn't find any predictions from the states to the performance. That said, it didn't matter how high they scored at, let's say, anxiety, they still played the same. Depression still played the same. And also the positive state didn't seem to matter. So this was actually quite a surprising for me because, as you said, I've been a player myself, and as a player, you always look for that zone of now I'm in the zone, now I'm in the flow, now I play a good game. So I thought that it has to matter, but the study showed that it didn't, and this was kind of surprising.
What were your I mean, obviously, you're trying to take a step back and look at this from a neutral perspective. You're open and honest there to admit that you're surprised as a psychologist. I mean, is there an element of disappointment almost?
No, actually not, because when we sat down and talked about it, I became quite happy actually, because we can see that these players can perform despite having these negative states. So then I started to think about it, and we started to think about it, and saw that, or talked about how can this be possible. And we mentioned some of these things in the study, but it's probably more to come ahead.
Okay, we'll put a pin in that because that's a lovely,
Yeah.
interesting interpretation that we can unpack. So no discernible differences between positive and negative mental states experienced day to day on performance. Talk to me about the impact of, because you're honing in on the measurement post performance. Talk to me about
Mm,
what you saw with relation to performance and its relationship with mental states
mm.
post performance.
Yeah, this was a totally different story because how they performed predicted how they felt or the psychological states the following day. So, stronger performance led to more positive psychological states, and while poorer performance predicted more negative states. So, if they played a bad game, they had higher levels of anxiety, depression, and if they play a good game, they had uh, higher scorings of like exciting and happy and stuff like that.
But let's unpack that a little bit. What's your
Hmm.
takeaways or your thoughts there?
I wasn't surprised by these results because I remember when I played hockey and I had a bad game or I did a few mistakes and stuff like that. I did feel really, really, really bad the day after. And we saw this with our participants in the study as well. And as I said before, I think this is a forgotten topic when it comes to elite sport.
I think so. As you said, you felt. I mean, hey, look, I experienced this, and obviously, we both work with sports people. You've experienced it personally. I've experienced it personally as a playing professional in my sport, and
Mm.
um, it can impact your whole week.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about, the potential for, I mean, catastrophic is probably the wrong word and maybe too strong a word, I don't know, but
Mm.
it can, if we think of, there's so many things to say here, sport being games of momentum, and training takes on momentum, and, if we are engulfed in the kind of emotions that might be considered unhelpful post game, and we're not able to manage that effectively, it can very much impact the training week ahead, which then can have knock-on effects. With that
Mm.
sort of, is that where you're coming from as well?
Yeah, that's right. But it's still worth noticing that even if they felt depression or feeling down and feeling
Mm,
anxious after the game, they still perform the next game.
gotcha.
So that's got us thinking maybe it's more of a problem long term
Okay.
because we know that negative states are linked to heighten risk of getting injured, getting sick, lose motivation and stuff like that. So I think it's probably a bigger problem in the long term than for the next game.
It almost feels like you're drawing on well-being there and its
Yeah.
impact on, so not
Mm.
so more a case of not necessarily sort of suggesting, okay, I'm experiencing low mood the next day, so that's going to impact
Mm.
my training. There's actually, it's more working through this notion of, I'm in low mood, and if I experience that a lot, that's going to impact
Hmm.
my well-being, and I might experience ill-being, and then subsequently that's going to have a lot of unpleasant effects on my capacity to engage in my sport, and engage appropriately in my sport day to day.
That's right, and engaging in with my family and friends and stuff like that. So being an NHL player is more than playing the games because I work with people playing there now, and it's the games is of course the main part of it, but it's like when we talked about the psychiatric unit, they are still people.
Yeah, it's well said. It's well said. So let's return back to pre-game and those mental states.
Mm.
And you had what you might describe as a different interpretation of the idea that those mental states didn't impact performance, that you felt that showed something else, something perhaps more positive, if we're going to use that term
Mm.
here. So can you unpack that a little bit for me?
Yeah, maybe not a different, but probably an additional
Okay.
take or an alternative
Okay.
take, because As I said before, previous research suggests that negative state is not good for performance. But those studies have rarely or almost never included in elite athletes because they're, like we talked about, they're really hard to get involved in studies like this. So maybe it is like this, that the elite athletes being at the very, very top, they have learned ways of play despite feeling anxious or down. So maybe that's the part of it. And that could be useful because then people working with athletes like you and me can use this to find a different way of helping other athletes gaining these skills to be able to, how should I say, to relate to the states. Because I'm not a big fan of suppression. Maybe relate is a better word. To see this, now is this happening? I feel anxious. This is really scary. What should I do? I still have to play my game, and that would be some more of a act approach to it. Like I feel
Yes.
this. I still have to do these good behaviors. I know I'm good at, and which is going to help me and the team doing a good game. So that's alternative interpretation of it.
I enjoy that, and I love that idea of relate
Mm.
to that state. I mean, you spoke there about ACT, and we've spoken about ACT on the Sports Psych Show plenty of times now for everybody listening in. Acceptance, commitment therapy, and accepting the let's in very simple terms differentiate between the internal and maybe the external as in the action, and more of an acceptance of what you're experiencing internally, and then committing to the kind of actions that you've got to execute, and we relate to those emotions, thoughts, and feelings, and accommodate them even, and really working in servitude of, an ACT. They talk a lot about diffusion, don't they? To diffuse the impact feeling states have
Mm.
on actions. No question, Johan. Just a reflection back at you.
I totally agree. That's a big part of it, not being dragged around by your states, to be have them sit at your lap or have them beside you and feel, oh, we feel this together and it's okay. I still have to skate. I have still need to help my teammates, and I'm able to do this despite feeling or experience these negative states.
Do you recognize that competence from your own career?
Actually, I do. It has
Mm.
been a big part of my own journey in elite sports. As I said before, I asked myself, what am I able to do? And then I of course had a lot of bad days going to the gym or going to out running and even playing games. But I found ways of relate to that. And with that said, it could be acceptance sometimes. It could be some suppression other times. Now, I can't feel this much right now. I can take that later. So I'm a big fan of having a quite a big toolbox of different strategies,
Yes.
and then you have to try it.
Yes.
Now I try this. Does it work? No. Okay, I try something else. Maybe I try self-talk now. Does it work? No. I try something else, because in my opinion, this is so individual, and we saw that in our study as well. It's the association between states and performance is also very individual. So if I just can summarize and try to answer your question, yes, I've seen it in
Yeah.
my own life and in my own career, and I'm a big fan of using different strategies, and acceptance being probably the number one.
As am I. I mean, I constantly call for the importance of individual athletes having mental frameworks
Yeah,
for their game, with frameworks being filled, and not necessarily. I think in general across sports, and this goes for coach influence on athletes, is not being scared of helping athletes having multiple tools, techniques, strategies. No, we don't want people to overthink, of course not, and we don't want to confuse people. But at the same time, I think for players to have a sophisticated relationship with their internal experiences, call it thoughts, emotions, feelings, if you'd like, I think that's critical for them in order to help them search to be the very best player they can be, because that complexity is rife, isn't it? Because it's to meet what you said there. One day, one thing might work. For example, I might be able to suppress something through, I don't know, my self-talk or some kind of embodied action.
Yep.
Whereas in another day, it might be more, from what I'm experiencing, it might be more suitable for me to sit with it or use it or
Yep.
anything like that. You know, just as you use the negative feedback from your colleagues to drive your
Like
motivation.
that would be reappraisal, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
So,
talk a lot with my clients about this. Maybe we have to try it during practice first, and we can try it. Now we try distraction today. How did it work? Not good. Okay, maybe we can try it later. Now we try reappraisal. Now we try acceptance, or I don't know, suppression. So try to build all the time, build a bigger toolbox for your strategies or techniques and stuff like that.
which I think is the compelling, fun, and infuriating element of our job.
Yeah,
Because
it is.
yeah. Hey, look, just to close off this conversation here. I mean, like all good research papers, at the end, you do speak to some what you perceive to be some limitations,
Yeah.
and it's interesting. I'll come on to these limitations in a second, but to briefly introduce this, as I was reading the paper, which I loved, and I find myself agreeing with all that you've said. At the same time, as I was reading, I was thinking, but what about just before, and what about during? And I think we've spoken to that a great deal, but in terms of that sophisticated relationship players can have with their thoughts, emotions, feelings. What always, on the Sports Soak Show, we've spoken to so many great players around states and thoughts and emotions and feelings, and we've spoken about leaning on some great work about around effortful performance and effortless performance and areas like that. And I think it's compelling. In the limitations, you talk about perhaps being able to measure states right before performance and then potentially during performance. Can you speak towards those limitations?
Yeah, that would be the number one limitation of this study, the temporal aspect of it, because we measured the states at noon and they played a game a few hours later. So that's, of course, a big problem. And I should say it's way better than studies done before, but it's not good enough because states going to vary across the day and also during a game. And it's so hard to try to get a good measurement because we could send them notifications during intermissions. It's possible, but the coaches probably don't going to agree. So
Good luck with that one, Johan.
don't get me started, triggered again. No, but this is the number one limitation, of course. But I still think it's good enough. It's not great. It's not the best. We talked about getting the assessment closer to the games, but then we didn't know how that would affect the response rates because we know that the players are at the game or at the rink maybe 2 hours before the game, getting ready, talk with each other, talk with the coaches. So it's really hard. But this is the number one limitation, of course.
It's dynamic, isn't it?
It
And
is.
it is a limitation. However, I also think research papers are about having spark great conversations like
Yeah.
we've had today.
And I should say also, I think it's a bigger limitation or a bigger problem when it comes to the state affecting or predicting the performance than the other way around. Because we saw that, oh, I played a bad game, now I feel depressed or more anxious. So I think it's the bigger problem from the state to subsequent performance.
I agree. I agree. Johan, what a absolutely fantastic conversation. I'm so pleased we did this, and I can't thank you enough. And look, I know you will have really tapped the interest of all those listening in. So, if I may ask, and if you're willing to give out some details, how can people find you, follow you, potentially get in contact, and find this paper?
First of all, I would like to take the opportunity to give a big shout out to my team. It has been a tough struggle sometimes. We aimed high, but we made it happen. So big shout out to Anna Lallo firstly, and then the other amazing researchers and clinicians. And now I forgot what you asked, but they people
How can people find you, follow you, get in contact, and find this paper?
at the beach in northern Sweden. No, I'm just kidding. They can find me at Instagram, where my name is Johan Forsberg, or at LinkedIn, at X. They can find me anywhere, and or just send me an email, and you can find my details at my Instagram page.
That's absolutely perfect. Johan, and I've realised from your pronunciation that I've completely anglicised your name as well, so I do apologise.
Close enough.
Close enough. All right. Well, you're a gentleman. That's very kind of you. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, everybody, I really enjoyed that podcast episode, and I'd love to know what you, the listener, think. So please do get in touch via X or Facebook or through my website, danabrahams.com, to tell me what you think of the show. And if you do have any suggestions, I'd be delighted to hear them. I'm already looking forward to next week's episode. Bye for now.